Hello and welcome to Healthcare Supervision. We are going to be talking about theories of management and leadership in our first chapter. This is a new textbook, so this information is going to be new to me as well. We're going to still use the same format that we used in health records as far as the slides go and our lecture. So we'll follow along these slides. Now, one thing about these slides is they are not quite as informational as some of the other slides that you've become accustomed to. So you will need to dig into this chapter and read this information thoroughly. We're going to start on page 2 in the textbook, and we're going to talk a little bit about management, and then we're going to get into these management and leadership terms. So management is an essential component of the health information profession, and understanding management from a historical perspective is the precipitating factor behind the creation of this first chapter. Research of management and leadership theories provides a strong foundation for HIM and leadership within today's healthcare environment. Now, if we drop down, it talks about the actual definition of management per AHIMA as the process of planning, organizing, and leading organizational activities. This is the standardized definition for understanding the study of management within this chapter, and the fundamental definition used throughout this text. Now, we're going to get into these terms here. So our first term is a manager. Now, we've all probably had jobs in the past, and we've had someone that was technically our boss. Sometimes we may call those a supervisor, we may call those a manager. But a manager is an individual who is in charge of a business or a department in this sense. So the Health Information Management Director, they would be the manager, as they would be in charge of that department. Our next term is a leader. This is someone who has commanding authority or influence. Now, this person may have no supervisory duties or responsibilities within a department, but we all know that there are people that have that talent. They have the ability to influence others. So a leader does not necessarily have to be a manager or a supervisor. Third term is follower. This individual is in the service of another. Also an employee. They work for another person or for an organization for wages or a salary. And then we have our subordinate. This is an individual in a position of less power or authority than someone else. So as a supervisor, the people that report to you are your subordinates. They have less power and less authority than you do as the supervisor. All right, dropping down to management theory, this is a collection of ideas which set forth general rules on how to manage a business or an organization. Management theory addresses how managers and supervisors relate to their organizations and the knowledge of its goals, the implementation of effective means to achieve the set goals, and how to motivate employees to perform the highest standard. Now, we're going to get into the different types of management. We're going to talk briefly about 5 within this chapter. Our first one is scientific management. Now, scientific management is studying work processes and how they impact workers' productivity. Scientific management theory is primarily concerned with improving the efficiency of individual employees in the work environment by assessing the distribution of work, studying time and motion of job tasks, as well as measuring the work performed. Now, within this chapter, this first chapter, we've got some key players that we're going to associate with each one of these types of management. Now, our first person for scientific management is going to be Frederick Taylor. Now, he was a management theorist that introduced time and motion studies for assessing the efficiency of performed work. He felt that managers needed more knowledge about work processes in order to actually motivate their employees to actually perform their jobs well. He published the Principles of Scientific Management in 1911, in which he established the Taylor management style that believed managers could improve employees' work efficiencies by streamlining work motions and hiring employees who were amenable to performing job tasks utilizing a prescribed motion methodology. His principles were founded on his research of employees in the workplace and how work performed impacted employees' productivity. Now, his time and motion studies actually provided the foundation for people to understand time and effort required to actually complete a task. And he's also been labeled the father of scientific management. So he kind of got this ball rolling for us. Be sure to read down through here. We have our Taylorisms at the bottom. There are 4 guiding management principles identified in Taylor's work. So just read through those. Pretty interesting stuff there. Now, we're going to move along to our next scientific management theorist. This is going to be Max Weber. He introduced the bureaucracy theory around 1904, and although a lot of his work wasn't published until after he died in 1920, his theory revolved around concepts of legitimate authority in an organization. So we all know what authority is. It's the right to actually make decisions and take actions to carry out a task. Now, legitimate authority identifies individuals who have the right to demonstrate power over other individuals in a bureaucratic organization. Now, his theory outlined a hierarchical or pyramidal structure to help achieve the most rational and efficient operation at the lowest cost, along with providing authority to those who had management positions within the hierarchy. Now, in his work, he identified 3 types of legitimate theory within the organizations. So first is traditional, and if you look over on page 5 in figure 1.2, we have some examples in healthcare. So our traditional authority is going to be the corporate owner of the healthcare organization, or the chief executive officer, or the president, or the board of directors. So we're talking about the top level of the hierarchy here, okay? His second type of legitimate authority was the rational legal authority. Now in healthcare, we're talking about using an organizational chart here, and we're looking at the manager-employee relationships, or we're looking at federal and state guidelines for healthcare oversight. If you go back over to 4, it says rational legal authority is displayed as boundaries outlined within organizations which rely on the rules and laws imposed by those in authoritative management positions. Examples of rational legal authority are the President of the United States. So President Trump is an example of rational legal authority. And again, the CEO in a healthcare organization. Now, it did say the CEO is also a traditional authority, but then the text actually says that it is also a rational legal authority. Then our last, charismatic authority. So again, we talked about people that may not necessarily have supervisory positions or have supervisory duties or responsibilities. Well, these charismatic people could just be leaders. It says embodies a leader who has the capacity to influence subordinates. Weber saw charismatic authority as valuable and effective during times of instability. And if we look at our figure 1.2, it says an example of a healthcare charismatic authority is a dynamite speaker or other leader within a healthcare organization. And so this individual could be someone that leads from the middle. Again, they may not be that top dog in that organization. They could truly be your HIM manager, or if your department had a trainer, or someone that was just charismatic and could not necessarily bend people to their will, but just let them understand their viewpoints and make it so that everyone was comfortable and, not afraid to go along with what they said because they trust that person. All right, so moving on to our next people, we have Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. Now, they were innovators who followed closely in Taylor's footsteps by continuing scientific management research. However, their perspective on studying work and workers differed from Taylor's. So in 1907, Frank Gilbreth performed time and motion studies on workers within the manufacturing industry to assess efficiency of workers' performance. He used stopwatch time studies to evaluate how workers performed tasks and how body mechanics impacted the time required to complete tasks. Later in his research, the stopwatch was replaced with recorded motion picture film and was called micromotion study. The micromotion study allowed the Gilbreths to film workers completing tasks, review these tasks by playing back the film clips, and then analyze workers' performance for efficiencies that could be obtained by modifying different components of the task. He introduced new scientific management concepts into the workplace, such as reorganization and improvement of the routing of work, introduction of planning departments, and cost accounting. And it talks about in 1916, together they published a paper titled Fatigue Study, relaying that the aim of the motion study was to accurately determine fatigue resulting from job task, to design the task so that unnecessary movements are removed, and to design efficient workstations to decrease worker fatigue. Okay, so our last person we're going to talk about in the scientific management realm is going to be Henry Gantt. Gantt, that word looks familiar. And as you can see on bottom of page 6, in figure 1.3, we have a Gantt chart. So this is where the Gantt chart came from. So his legacy, of course, is the Gantt chart. And we learned in PI that a Gantt chart is a bar chart that allows project managers to plan and control projects at a glance. So the Gantt chart defines the steps of the project and the completion dates of each step. And so again, if you look at your example, you have task number 1 through 13. We see the duration, and then we show where they fall within that 3-month timeline or that 13-week timeline. Now, the Gantt chart, Gantt made 3 other contributions to the development of scientific management through his research. So we have the task and bonus system, which we can all relate to, that if workers are given specific stated reward, if they could perform tasks within the time allotted, and then a further bonus if they could significantly better that time, overall productivity increased immensely. So if somebody tells me, hey, if you can do this task within 1 week, I'm going to give you a bonus. And if you can do it within 6 days, I'm going to give you a bigger bonus. I'm sure enough going to do my best to get my bonus. Second was the perspective of the worker. He took into account the role the supervisor played in getting subordinates to perform. And third, the social responsibility of business. He increasingly believed that management had obligations to the community at large and that the profitable organization had a duty toward the welfare of society. He also identified a technique called backcasting. This is where you actually decide on your goal, and then you're going to work backwards from the goal to determine what current state steps need to be taken to achieve the goal. So if we know what our goal is, we kind of go backwards through the process to figure out what steps we need to take to actually meet that goal. All right, so we're going to move on to administrative management. We have 4 individuals in this group as well. Administrative management is another management theory developed in the early 20th century, and it overlaps with scientific management in trying to understand how work is performed, but it incorporates assessing the organization as a whole in relation to the work being performed. So our administrative management theory attempts to identify the design of an organization and is associated with the following principles. Requires a formalized administrative structure where there are clear lines of authority marked as a hierarchical structure. It defines a clear division of labor among workers, and it reflects delegation of power and authority to upper management. So our first administrative management theorist is Henry Fayol. His theory focuses on 14 principles of management. He identified 5 key managerial functions. So we have forecasting and planning, organization, commanding, coordinating, and controlling the work of the organization. And we're going to talk more about those steps in chapter 2. But when we get back into his 14 principles of management, if you flip over to page 8, you see in table 1.1 his 14 principles of management. So your principle is labeled on the left column, and then you have the relevance of that principle to healthcare organizations in the right column. So be sure to kind of study through those, understand what each one of those means. All right, moving on to our second person, we're going down to James D. Mooney. He was employed by General Motors and is most noted for his unpublished paper, The Science of Industrial Organization. And his paper suggests 6 principles of organization. First, we have the division of duties. There's a natural division of labor because some individuals are better at certain tasks than other tasks. Then you have coordination of effort. So because of that natural division of labor, coordination must occur to achieve the objective of work efforts. So if I'm good at one task and you're good at another task, then I'm going to do one task, you're going to do another, but together we're going to collaborate to ensure that we achieve that overall need, that overall objective. Then we have leadership. Authority resides in formal positions of responsibility such as management roles. Then we have delegation of duties. This is a responsibility of completing work efforts requiring delegation of duties by management roles to employees within an organization. Then we have the functional definition of duties. Because of the coordination and delegation of work required in day-to-day operations, a vertical division of labor outlining authority and responsibility within the organization is necessary. And then we have line and staff principle. This makes a distinction between the line managers who make work decisions and the staff managers who provide advice about how work is to be performed. All right, moving over into page 8. At the bottom, we're going down to our third person, Chester Bernard. He developed his management theories while working for AT&T. Throughout the mid-1900s, Bernard provided a management foundation that not only addressed organizational structure, but also considered the managerial skills required to obtain cooperation from subordinates within the organization. He assessed that organizations contained a social entity and not just the organizational chart. He noted that goals within an organization could be achieved by cooperative attitudes between units, cross-training of personnel, interdepartmental instruction, organizational efficiency and effectiveness, creating authentic and realistic goals for the organization. That one's super important. Developing trust throughout all levels of the organization between employees and management, personal responsibility, and leadership flexibility and balance. Now, he not only published his administrative management theories, he also strived to practice those theories while he was at AT&T. He was successful as a manager and a teacher within the workplace, and his ability to persuade others to perform within their jobs allowed him to move up within the company. So it sounds to me like he was a pretty charismatic leader. Now, 2 management concepts associated with his views were the acceptance view of authority. So this is when an employee considers a request by the manager to be in the best interest of the group. It's understandable, and it's going to meet the employee's personal interest. Then we have the zone of indifference. This proves a manager's concept of power. This is the range in which a manager's orders will be perceived as legitimate, and the employee will act on or perform the request without a great deal of thought. So the zone of indifference kind of means my manager told me to do this. I know they're my boss. It's a legitimate request. I'm just going to do it. You know, I'm not thinking, oh, well, why is he asking me to do this? Or why does this even make sense? You know, there's no thought really. I'm going to do it. He's my boss. He has the authority to do so, and it's legitimate. So I'm going to move on about my business. All right, moving on to our fourth person in administrative management. This is Mary Parker Follett. She was the first theorist within the administrative management group to be concerned with the psychosocial approach to industry and organizational management rather than the more scientific approach to management. Her early writings and research centered on the philosophical and psychological foundations of workers and the interdisciplinary approach workers contribute to an organization. The management terms most associated with her work are togetherness and group thinking. Her theory revolved around productive management practices where the manager exercised power with others rather than over others. So she was very team oriented. All right, we're going to move on to our humanistic management. Now, humanistic management was a shift from scientific management in that individual human needs and human values were considered within the management of the organization. For a management style to be considered humanistic, 3 dimensions have to be considered. First, human dignity. Second, ethical complexities are evaluated. And third, all stakeholders must be involved in the decision-making process. Now, our first humanistic management theorist is Elton Mayo. And in 1927, he began his research in human relations management at the Hawthorne plant of Western Electric in Cicero, Illinois. His thoughts differed from Taylor's scientific management theory in that he assumed employees were not only interested in receiving remuneration for services, which is pay or money, but also wanted to be considered unique individuals with goals and aspirations that match those of the organization. The Hawthorne studies examined productivity and work conditions for a group of female workers at the Hawthorne plant for almost a year. The study parameters evaluated where the impact of change to hours, wages, rest periods, lighting conditions, organization, and degree of supervision, and what specific conditions impacted the works group performance and productivity. Now, there were 4 general conclusions in the Hawthorne studies. So first, the aptitudes of individuals are imperfect predictors of job performance. Second, informal organization affects productivity. Third, work group norms affect productivity. And fourth, the workplace is a social system. Now, who's all got their little work clique? Friends that you talk to that kind of help get you through your workday. So again, the workplace is a social system. You're not going there and minding your own business all day and not speaking to anybody else. And that's going to affect productivity. Informal organization affects productivity. Your work group norms affect productivity. All right, our second person is Abraham Maslow. Who's ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs? Well, this is where it comes from. He was a psychologist and a researcher, and he provided a theory to the management of a body of knowledge that addresses employees' motivation in terms of human relations. His management research addressed a behavioral scientific approach to the employee motivation and motivational theory. So his hierarchy of human needs strive to understand the needs of people at work and what motivated employees to perform within an organization. In his theory, an employee's needs are arranged in hierarchy from low-level psychological needs, such as staying alive and being safe, to the highest level, which is self-actualization, such as self-fulfillment and achievement. His theory enlightened the ways that managers evaluated employees' needs and required managers to assess what they could do for the employees to succeed rather than what the employees could do for management. All right, our last person in humanistic management is Douglas McGregor. This is where we get theory X and theory Y. Now, he thought that you either were a X-type person or a Y-type person. And an X-style person, when I say two types of people, I'm talking about 2 different types of management approaches. So theory X and theory Y. And this is how a theory X manager thinks about the employees that are under them. Theory X managers believe that their employees are lazy, that they don't want to change, that they don't like to take on responsibility. They need to be incentivized to do their work or threatened to do their work, and that those employees are disloyal. But our theory Y manager is exactly the opposite. These managers believe that their employees are motivated, that they're open to change, that they can handle responsibility, and that they actually prefer rewards over threats. Who would have thought? And that these employees are loyal. Participatory management is a style in which management allows employees to take an active role in decision-making process that relates directly to their jobs. So our theory Y managers lean toward this participatory management, whereas our theory X managers, again, these think that our people are lazy and that they're resistant to change. They're more in that authoritarian management style. So the leader dictates the policies and procedures. They decide what goals are going to be achieved. They direct and control all activities without meaningful participation by the subordinates. So that's our theory X and our theory Y. Now, additionally, two concepts addressed by McGregor include job enlargement and collaborative performance appraisals. Now, job enlargement is the concept that adding a variety of job tasks to an individual's job will decrease monotony and thereby allow more job flexibility. So if I'm a clerk in an HIM department and all I do all day long is scan documents into the electronic health record, that might get a little boring. But if I also get to go to the floor and pick up discharge charts, and I also get to help out in release of information, and I also might get to do some chart analysis, then I'm breaking up that monotony. Now, our collaborative performance appraisals, these engage employees within the process of evaluating work performed. They require managers to solicit input from employees about actual work performance. So it's not just the manager coming in and saying, oh, well, you had a great year this year, you did this and this. Well, I may have done that and that, but guess what? I did this and I did that and I did this and our group did this. There's so much that the manager may not get to see on that day-to-day basis. So when you have a collaborative performance appraisal, the employee actually has some input. All right, moving on to operations management. We're going into our fourth type of management here. Now, in our management, operation management, we're not really talking about people. We're talking more about operations management theories. You're going to be familiar with these. We covered these in PI. Now, first of all, operations management is management that deals with the design and management of products, processes, services, and supply chains. It considers the acquisition, development, and utilization of resources that firms need to deliver the goods and services clients want. So it evaluates tools that are needed to manage processes of interrelated activities. Operations managers need to focus on forecasting, planning, scheduling, managing inventories, assuring quality, and motivating employees so as to guide the organization in decision making. Now, two of the things that we're going to talk about is Six Sigma and Lean. So again, these are very familiar to you. So Motorola again created Six Sigma back in 1986 as a set of techniques and tools utilized to improve the capability of organizational business processes. It was created to identify defects as a result of manufacturing process and improves the variability of product outcomes upon implementation of process improvement initiatives. So again, we're trying to get rid of the defects. And again, it talks about the DMAIC approach, where we define the opportunity for improvement, measure current performance, analyze the opportunity, improve the opportunity, and control performance after improvements are made. Now, moving over to page 12, it says in healthcare, Six Sigma is most frequently associated with focusing on application of the DMAIC problem-solving framework and process changes as a result of utilizing the framework. Outcome and metrics are a result of the process changes, and cost and revenue improves as a result of utilizing the Six Sigma method. Now, dropping down to Lean. Again, Lean is a management strategy that utilizes less to do more and is a process improvement strategy that can be utilized in any type of organization. Now remember, Lean was developed through Toyota Production System in the 90s. The basic concept in Lean management is to create more value for customers while using fewer resources. All right, and then we have we have contemporary management. This is where we get into Management by Objectives by Peter Drucker. Now, contemporary management uses current practices to plan, organize, and control individuals within an organization. It says, given their complexity, today's healthcare organizations rely on managers who can assess an organization's culture and utilize the best of the best managerial skills to lead within the organization. And so this is where we get into Peter Drucker. He was an author, teacher, writer, and a management consultant, and he is nicknamed the father of modern management. He spent many years studying a variety of topics associated with management. He believed that it was up to management to maintain a positive work environment in order for employees to stay motivated to perform. He originally introduced Management by Objectives within an early writing entitled The Practice of Management in 1954. MBO is a management style in which the objective of an organization are agreed upon by management and employees so that everyone is working toward common goals. Now, if you look at page 13, it says Drucker was concerned with the concepts of business management and structure, and he focused primarily on two key elements of an organization: the employee as a whole, which is referred to as a knowledge worker, and the organization as a whole. He believed that management is concerned with the individuals who are working interdependently toward common goals and values. Management should provide the right structure, training, and development so employees can succeed at their jobs. And in Management by Objectives, managers must challenge themselves and their teams to achieve goals by utilizing self-control and self-discipline. Managers must have a vision and lead responsibly. The knowledge worker within a Management by Objectives organization is concerned with self-directed productivity and the quality of work performed. All right, so that covers our 5 types of management. Now we've got one last little section when we talk about leadership here. So we're going to cover this a little quicker than we just covered the rest, and then we'll be finished with chapter 1. All right, so we're picking up with leadership theories. So let's talk about the differences between leadership and management. Now, if we go back and look at the definition of management, it says it's the process of planning, organizing, and leading organizational activities. Well, leadership is the activity of guiding a group of people to a definite result. Many theorists feel that leadership is not a skill that can be taught to individuals, but rather is an innate quality that appears within individuals. In most organizations, management is the formal structure of the organization, and people in management have the authority to ensure tasks are accomplished by employees' efforts. Leadership can be an inherent component of management, but can also be exhibited both informally and formally within a healthcare organization. Remember, we talked about those people, those charismatic people that have influence on others. And again, they may have no managerial responsibility whatsoever, but they can influence those around them. That's leadership. Now, we've got some classic theories of leadership that we're going to cover in the rest of these pages. So our first one, if you go over to page 14, is trait theory of leadership. Trait theory of leadership attempts to define the general qualities or traits that need to be present within an individual to be a leader. The great man theory is the most documented trait theory and notes that certain traits within individuals can be identified as predictors for effective leadership, and that by studying great historical leaders, individual traits can clearly be identified as keys for success in leadership. All right, then we have our behavioral theories of leadership. This focuses on the study of specific behaviors of leaders as opposed to leadership traits. So we're going to talk about some different theories here. We have the Iowa studies, the Ohio State leadership studies, the Michigan studies. We're going back to McGregor's X and Y theories, and then the managerial grid. We're going to talk about that as well. So the Iowa studies were conducted in 1939 at the Child Welfare Research Station within Iowa State University by Kurt Lewin, Ronald Lippitt, and Ralph K. White. They were all researchers at Ohio, at Iowa University. The Iowa studies were one of the first behavioral research studies focusing on leadership roles rather than the traits exhibited by leaders. These experimental research studies identified 3 leadership styles that are representative of the relations between leaders and individuals being led. This is where we get authoritarian, democratic, and laissez-faire. So the authoritarian leader, they dictate the activities to the work group, but they don't actually participate in the actual activities. They are very critical of the team's results. They have no skin in the game, so they can be critical without having participated. Then our democratic leader, they assist and encourage the work group. They allow the work group to select activities to be completed as a group and praise the group at completion of the work. Then our laissez-faire leader, they don't participate in the selection of group activities and do not provide praise or criticism to the work. This laissez-faire leader provides the resources for the group's activities, but does not interfere with how the group performs. So that's our Iowa studies. Now we have our Ohio State leadership studies. These were conducted by researchers who were a part of the Personnel Research Board at the Ohio State University. This research delineated a 2-dimensional theory of leadership behavior and assessed the dimensions of leadership concern over the task objectives and concern for relationship objectives. A leader behavior description questionnaire was developed by researchers, and it was given to leaders within actual workplaces. The questionnaire was used to determine 2 dimensions of structure for the employee. The questionnaire was used to determine the 2 dimensions of leadership exhibited by leaders within actual workplaces. When you have figure 1.6, it depicts a leader's low or high ability for initiating structure for employee job tasks and a leader's low or high ability to consider employee relations when initiating low or high structure for employees' task completion. So it gives us an example. A leader exhibiting both high structure and high consideration would provide the employees a strong task organization while at the same time taking into consideration employees' thoughts and feelings regarding the task. All right, let's move on to our Michigan studies. So these were undertaken in the early 1950s by researchers from the University of Michigan interested in understanding leadership behaviors in the actual workplaces. The Michigan studies built on the Ohio studies in terms of determining leadership behaviors that impact employees' productivity and enhance employee job satisfaction. The Michigan studies were more of a one-dimensional theory, in the employee-centered leadership and job-centered leadership are opposing leadership styles, and leaders are not able to focus on production and employees at the same time. But the Michigan studies did not take into effect situational variances that can impact leadership styles. These studies also noted that effective leaders utilized a participatory style of leadership where the leader involved a team of workers in decision making and problem solving in regard to work decisions. And then we go back to theory Y and theory X. So these were more closely related to the study of human relationship management, but also can be linked to leadership. McGregor's opinion of an employee's basic motivation to be led can be identified by either theory X, where employees are only motivated to perform through rewards or sanctions, or theory Y, where employees are motivated to perform through self-control and self-direction. Okay, then we have the leadership continuum. This was another behavioral theory of leadership that made a significant impact on leadership research within the U.S. In 1958, a leadership theory was developed by Robert Tannenbaum and Warren Schmidt based on the earlier Iowa studies. The leadership continuum assumed that leadership behavior can be explained in 7 steps of behavioral styles ranging from authority, which is our boss-centered leadership, to delegation, which is our team-centered leadership. And if you look down there at the leadership continuum in figure 1.7, you can see the different levels of the leadership continuum. Now moving over to the managerial grid on page 17. So this grid is a behavioral theory that offers a two-dimensional behavioral approach that assists individuals with identification of an appropriate leadership style through the concern for people, which is people-oriented, or task, which is production-oriented. Now, there's 4 distinct quadrants within the grid. So you have a high concern for people and a low concern for production, or you have whatever grid you fall into. But each one of these has a certain type of leader. So let's talk about the first one. Okay, if we are high concern for people and a high concern for productivity, we are a team or participative leader. This is an individual who likes to work in teams and participates actively to get the work done. So this person's going to score high for both people and production. So they're in the top right quadrant. Now, our country club leader, again, they have a high concern for people, but a low concern for production. They are an individual that wants to include everyone in the process and wants to make sure that everyone's getting along and having fun rather than actually getting the work done. All right, then we have our authoritarian leader. They have a low concern for people, but a high concern for productivity. So they just want you to get the job done, and they don't really give a crap what you think. So they, again, high for productivity, low for people. Then we have our impoverished or our laissez-faire leader. They rank low on both. Low for people, low for productivity. They don't really take initiative to lead, and they surely don't participate in getting the work done. All right, so let's move on to our contingency approach to leadership. Now, the contingency approach to effective leadership is dependent on matching the leader's style to the workplace situation. Among the most popular contingency approaches of the 20th century are Fiedler's contingency model, the path-goal theory, and normative decision model, and situational theory. So Frederick Fiedler's contingency model. First, let's talk about, he was here in the early 1960s, and his theory is dependent on the leader's task or relationship motivational style and situational control. And he identified 2 different types of leadership. Task motivated, so they're focused on the worker's task, and then relationship motivated, where they're actually focused on the relationships associated with workers. Fiedler utilized the least preferred coworker scale to identify the relationship between a leader's orientation or style and the group performance under differing situational conditions. The findings from Fiedler's work proposed a concept known as situational favorability, which asserts that task or relationship motivations are contingent on whether the leader can control and predict a group's outcome. His theory has been tested by a number of researchers over the years, and his theory has held up well in terms of predicting group outcomes based on the assessment of leadership styles. All right, dropping down to our path goal theory. This was originally developed in the 1970s by Martin Evans, and it was expanded on by Robert House in 1971. It suggests that a leader should develop a path for followers to achieve group goals. And we have different leadership styles identified in the path goal theory. So we have directive leaders. They're the ones that are going to give you a specific instruction to complete your work. Supportive leaders, they're going to give you emotional support. Your participative leaders allow followers to participate in decision-making processes associated with their work. And then you have the achievement-oriented leader. They set goals for their followers and actually assist the followers achieve them. Dropping down to our normative decision model. 1973, Victor Vroom and Philip Yetten developed the normative decision model, which focuses on situational factors rather than leadership behaviors and guides managers through the decision-making process depending on the type of problem encountered. There's 5 different methods that vary in the degree to which the decision strategy permits subordinates to participate in the decision-making process. And so the 5 methods, first is your autocratic leadership style. Again, the leader has control over all decisions and there's little or no input from the work group. This is beneficial when decisions need to be made quickly by the leader. Your consultative leadership is task-oriented and focuses on getting input from those who perform the task. The ultimate decisions for the group are still made by the leader, but this leadership style takes into account the feedback provided from individual workers. Then you have participative leadership. Participative leadership, also called collaborative leadership, is a style in which the leader allows the worker to provide input and make decisions about their work. Within the normative model, leaders utilize a complex decision tree, answering 8 different questions about the management situation in order to select leadership style that most closely fits the situation. All right, and our last in our contingency approach is situational leadership theory. Paul Hershey and Kim Blanchard developed this theory in 1969, which proposed that leadership effectiveness depends on the leader's ability to change his or her behavior to meet the demands of the situation. This theory also takes into account the maturity of the followers in terms of their ability and psychological willingness to work. The behavior of the leader fluctuates depending on the level of maturity exhibited by the follower, and the leader adjusts his or her leadership style based on this maturity. So, example, if a follower has a low task ability or maturity, the leader would have to utilize a more directive leadership style and provide more instruction on how to complete the task. But a follower with a higher level of task maturity would be able to complete the work with very little direction from the leader. So in this approach, I become who I need to be based on who you are. If you're someone that needs a lot of instruction and a guiding hand, then I have to provide that to you. So I change my approach based on your ability. All right, now we're moving into, we've got about 3 more to go, and then we're going to be finished with this chapter. So we're going to talk about transformational and transactional leadership theories. Now, in 1970, James McGregor Burns performed descriptive research on political leaders and their leadership styles. He said that there were 2 different types of inherent leaderships. So we have transformational and we have transactional. Now, transformational is the act of changing or transforming from one current state to another state. It focuses on the leader's attempt to motivate followers to achieve a higher level or to perform at a level beyond expectations. Leaders and followers in a transformational model bring one another to higher levels of motivation and morality. The leader creates an environment of trust, and therefore followers feel safe within their work environment. Be sure to read the 4 components of transformational leadership. I'm not going to read through each one of those. We're going to drop down to our transactional leadership. Now, transactional leadership is performed through structure and process. There's a hierarchy within the organization wherein leaders clarify goals and objectives for followers, and followers receive some kind of reward in exchange for performing work satisfactorily. The type of rewards elicited within this leadership model are items such as promotion, pay raise, or personal recognition. The model of the transactional leadership is very similar to McGregor's X and Y theories of management. Bernard Bass was a distinguished professor of management and leadership studies who performed research, conducted workshops, and lectured on leadership throughout the country. He was inspired by Burns to study transformational leadership and the ability of transformational leaders. He characterized transactional leaders as those who avoid risk and attempt to work within the system by maintaining status quo. Bass then characterized transformational leaders as those who seek new or innovative ways to perform work, are willing to take risk, and do not like the status quo. Bass noted that effective leaders are both transactional and transformational, rather than the polar opposites as identified by Burns. The multi-factor leadership questionnaire is a tool utilized to measure the components of transactional and transformation leadership, and Bass and his colleagues utilized this tool within their research to further assess different leadership styles more accurately. And then we come down to our values-based leadership. This is a style of leadership built on a foundation of personal values, principles, or ethics. Values are a key component of effective leadership. Now, what's a value? Well, it's a principle or idea intrinsically valuable or desirable. So values-based leadership makes certain that leaders effectively communicate values of integrity and responsibility to employees within the organization. In order for value-based leadership to take hold within an organization, leaders should be motivated and committed to the values of the organization. Leaders must work on the following elements in order to represent a values-based leadership style. So first, there's self-reflection. They should reflect on his or her personal and professional values and incorporate these values into their leadership style. Second, organizational balance. A leader should embrace the values represented by organization and reflect these values within their sphere of influence. Then third, values of a team of followers. They should take note of the values of the individuals within his or her team and incorporate these values within his or her leadership style. And lastly, commitment to values leadership. A leader must commit to the value-based leadership style. This takes commitment from all management and leadership roles within an organization. This type of leadership style is inherent to all stakeholders when it is practiced on a regular basis within the organization. It requires leaders to stand by the organization's values and not compromise personal values if conflict occurs among leaders when values collide. And last but not least, we have servant leadership. Robert Greenleaf, he was employed at AT&T for 28 years, and he provided management contributions to the organization. Now, while he was at AT&T, he realized that organizations that thrive have able leadership that provides support to employees and serves both the employees and the organization. So, in 1970, he defined servant leadership as a philosophy and set of practices that enriches the lives of individuals, builds better organizations, and ultimately creates a more just and caring world. Now, servant leaders, unlike your traditional leaders, share the power of leadership with those that they serve. It emphasizes increased service to others, a holistic approach to work, promoting a sense of community, and sharing power in decision making. And there's 10 characteristics associated with servant leaders. First, they listen. Second, they have empathy. Third, they have an awareness of themselves and of their co-workers. Then their stewardship, their commitment to people, persuasion, foresight, healing, conceptualization, and community building. The philosophy of servant leadership fits well with a healthcare environment, as caregivers must put the needs of whom they serve first. Although this is a leadership style that theoretically fits within healthcare, it's a difficult style to embrace, and most healthcare leaders utilize other leadership skills and characteristics when developing within a healthcare organization. All right, so that's going to cover Chapter 1. You're going to be asked to complete your review questions as a quiz, and you don't have another assignment for Chapter 1, just the review questions, but each additional chapter we are going to cover another assignment. These are going to be found in Canvas, and so my suggestion to you is to use the PowerPoint. Again, it's not necessarily the same type of PowerPoint that you have experienced in the past. It's very basic and kind of just more along the lines of kind of leading you through the chapter instead of actually informing you or giving you information. But use the PowerPoint to kind of go through and freshen yourself up on the different terms. Where it says to define servant leadership, go through and make sure you understand each one of those terms. And again, I will continue to offer the lectures. So good luck and